Here we go. We're on Mem Beis, Amud Beis. We are analyzing the Mishnah that spoke about things which are not chametz in the most perfect sense. It's not bread, but it's things which have chametz, which have elements of chametz. So, the first thing we discussed was Sheikhar Hamadi, Median beer. Beer. Keep in mind, back in the day, beer was made with dates, okay? There's actually someone made for, there's a beer that was on the market for a little while called Tej, which was kosher for Pesach beer. It was actually really good. It tasted kind of like Moscato. It was like very sweet, and basically, which was the classic way they made beer then, which much sweeter. But so medium beer though was something which they added Deramube Meisa'ari. They added barley water to it. Right? This was not barley like our beer is made out of barley. It wasn't made out of barley. They added some barley into it. That's why it's chametz. Certainly, our beer is undoubtedly chametz. But they had to explain why medium beer is chametz because in addition to the dates, they added some barley. Okay, the chometz adomi and idumian vinegar, deshada besari. This vinegar also they added barley into the wine that came from this region, and that's what made it. It turned it into vinegar. Apparently, adding the barley into it is what turned it into vinegar. Says the Gemara, Amrav Nachman, b'tchila v'shoyim mevim nechsachim Yehuda. Originally, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, and they would bring wine libations from Yehuda, from the wine of Yehuda, lo haya yenam shel Yehuda machmetz. The wines of Yehuda was so good that it would never turn sour. The wines of Yehuda were known for their great taste and great flavor and intensity, and it wouldn't turn into vinegar. Okay, so they would put barley into it to turn it into vinegar. And that's what it was when you described vinegar. It was Judean wine that they added barley to it because that was the only way that wine actually turned into vinegar. The Achshav, however, now this is a very sad statement. In Yenam Shalodomia Mechmitzim Ashnos Arim. It's the wine of the Edomites, the wine of the people of Edom, which was descendants of Esav. Their wine does not turn sour until you add barley to it. Meaning Judean wine would easily turn into vinegar because it's such bad wine. In other words, while the Beis Hamikdash stood, while the Jewish people are getting brachas, then the wine that we had, it was so good, it was so powerful that it would be very difficult for it to turn into vinegar, and they had to add ingredients to it, i.e. barley, to make it into vinegar. Nowadays, Judean wine just turns into vinegar right away. But now the Edomite wine, it's something that until they add barley to it, it doesn't turn into vinegar. And they call it Adomi vinegar. Like and this phenomenon that historically the Judean wine, the Jewish wine, was so powerful, and now the Edomite wine is so powerful that fulfills the pasuk in Yecheskel that imala hacharava. That this is the pasuk in Yecheskel where it has the people of Edom saying that I will be filled from the desolate one. Right? That basically saying the people of Edom are saying that they are going to gain from our losses, that the people of Edom, they're going to gain from our losses. Malazo, charvazo, as if to say that when this one is full, when the Jews are full, then charvazo, then Edom is desolate. V'malazo, charvazo, and if this one is full, this one is desolate. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says a more famous pasuk, ulaom yamatz pasuk in Bereshis, and the one kingdom will be stronger than the other kingdom. Right? That Rivka gets this prophecy when she feels the baby struggling within her. Ulaom yamatz, that when one is strong, then the other one's going to be weak, and vice versa. And that's what's going on over here. That when the Jewish people are at a height, then the people of Edom are low. Okay, and you see that not only just in terms of the power of the nation, but also in terms of the bracha that the nation brings forward, and you see it therefore in their wine. Okay, Tanya, Amar Yehuda. Yehuda b'rishon chometz ma'aretz. In Yehuda originally, before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, if a person buys vinegar from Ma'aretz, eino tzarich la'aser, you don't have to give meiser. Why? Shechazaka eino element temed, because the assumption is that it comes from temed. Temed is basically water mixed with the waste of wine. Like there's dregs, there's stuff that you finish at the end of the winemaking process, and that's something which, at least at this point, we're assuming you don't have to give meiser. It's something which is not, you don't have to give meiser for, and therefore, if I buy vinegar from an Amaretz, I could assume that it didn't come from wine which became spoiled, right? Which would be something which I'd have to give meiser for. I could assume it comes from temed, which is just the waste of the wine, which is something I'm not obligated to give meiser on. The point that he's making, at least in this opening line, is that again, the wine was so good that it was never turning into vinegar, and therefore, again, there's just a reflection of that reality that back in the day, the Judean wine, the Jewish wine, was so good that it would never turn into vinegar, and therefore, if I buy vinegar from someone who I might be suspicious, if I buy vegetables from this person, I say, hey, did they give meiser? Did they not give meiser? I have to give meiser myself, right? Normally, when I buy from an Amaretz, I have to go and tithe myself because I can't trust them. But when it comes to vinegar, I can assume, I know that it's not coming from something which is, that comes from wine, because no one was making wine vinegar because the wine was just so good. Nowadays, after the destruction of the base of Mikdash, you have to assume that the vinegar is coming from wine, and therefore, if you buy vinegar from a person you wouldn't necessarily trust, you do have to take meiser. The Gemara questions this. A bit of a tangent. The Gemara says, "Wait a second. Is temed something? Again, something made from this temed, the bottom dregs. Is that something which you don't have to give meiser for?" We learned in the Mishnah, if someone makes temed, and a person, let's again, so temed is you have the stuff on the bottom of the barrel, okay, and you go ahead, you add water to it. So let's say a person adds water, you added 2 cups of water to it, and you take it, and then it drains out, and you have 2 cups of water in your cup. Pater, the Tanna Kama says you're pater because all the wine dregs did is it colored it. It didn't add any substance to it. Rabbi Yehuda mechayev. Rabbi Yehuda though says you are chayev to give meiser. You are chayev to give meiser. Why? Because it sounds like the Gemara is assuming right now that Rabbi Yehuda holds that simply the coloring and the flavor that is imparted, even though it's not a substantial addition, right? In other words, you put 2 cups in, 2 cups come out, right? So nonetheless, he says you are chayiv to get meiser because Rabbi Yehuda at this point, we're assuming, holds that simply the coloring, that now the water, again, if you poured water over the dregs, the water that's going to come out is going to be purple, right? It's not going to be white. It's not going to be clear, so the assumption is that Rabbi Yehuda holds that, but you see clearly, Rabbi Yehuda holds that temed is something you do have to give meiser from, even if it comes from the dregs. So the Gemara has 2 answers. Lo nechshtu ame aretz ala temed. What it means is that when we said, the one way of answering this is when Yehuda said that when they used to buy vinegar from an Amaretz, you don't have to give meiser. It didn't mean you don't have to give meiser. He meant that since it's coming from, since vinegar typically would come from the dregs, you wouldn't have to be suspicious that the Amaretz would be stingy and wouldn't give meiser. You could assume he did give meiser. In other words, that Bryce that initially told us that when you buy, now again, what did the Bryce say? The Bryce said, nowadays when you buy wine from a vinegar from Amaretz, you have to give meiser. Why? You have to assume he didn't get meiser. He didn't get meiser from his vinegar, which was originally wine. But back in the day, he said, the original version was, you don't have to give meiser. We're saying that's not what he meant. It doesn't mean you don't have to give meiser. It means that it wasn't that you don't have to give meiser because temed is something which doesn't have meiser. It's that, of course, temed is something that has to give meiser. But since it comes from temed, if you're an amaretz, right? And so normally, we're suspicious you don't give meiser. But if it's from wine, giving meiser from wine, that's expensive, right? You have to give a barrel of your wine away for meiser. Whoa, that's a lot. But if it's temed, if it's just dregs from the water, it's so insignificant that he would do it. So really, the first version is saying, of course, Rabbi Yehuda said that temed is obligated in giving meiser. He would hold that you would have to give meiser. It's just that when it comes to temed, it's so cheap that he wouldn't be concerned. Alternatively, Ibai Seima next to really they are suspect. Lokasha ha bidravka ha bidportzini. Okay, so in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that we just read, where Rabbi Yehuda said, in the Mishnah. We're saying when Rabbi Yehuda says that it's not subject to meiser, he refers to meiser being made from grape seeds. Grape seeds is something which, if you pour water over grape seeds, all that happens is that it colors the wine and nothing actually changes. When he said you are chayiv to give meiser, it's when you poured water over the leads. The leads are pieces which have potentially a little bit of wine trapped in it, and therefore, even though you pour 2 cups in, you get 2 cups out. You have to be concerned that it's not the same thing that went in that went out, right? In other words, I poured 2 cups over it, right? Now 2 cups of liquid come out. But is it water that comes out that's just colored? Or did it pick up some trapped wine that was stuck within the stuff, and therefore that's why he would say meiser. So there's no contradiction. In one place he said you don't have to get meiser for it. Why? Because it was made simply by pouring it over the seeds. The seeds, nothing's trapped in a seed. A seed is a solid item, right? And so you pour it over, all that happens is it colors it, and that's when Rabbi Yehuda said you don't have to get meiser on temet, because it just comes from the seeds and nothing happens. Over here, when he says you do have to get meiser, it's because of the fact that it went through the lead, and therefore there is actual substance of wine trapped in it, and you have to be concerned that the liquid that came out is actually wine and not just water. Good? Yes?
Amaretz doesn't give meiser because he has no concept of meiser at all.
It's not that he doesn't have a concept of it. It's that he's just lax. It's lax. Meaning, back in the day, you have to keep in mind, meaning Amaretz nowadays is different than Amaretz back then. we should be Amaretz back in the day. Back in the day, they knew, they just didn't care so much, right? It wasn't they were ignorant. The assumption isn't they were ignorant. The assumption is that they were just they were just not so careful about certain things. Amaretz is like, nowadays we use it more in ignoramus, right? That's where we use the term Amaretz. Amaretz back then was just someone who just wasn't as careful about halacha. But if halacha was the predominant way of life back then, they knew it. It's just like this, it's meiser. It's not such a big deal. That was the issue. Okay. The Yisom Mitzri, Egyptian Zisom. Remember, this is one of the things that was considered mixed chametz that was aser, and now the Gemara is going to tell us how, and it was used for therapeutic purposes. The Gemara says, "My Zisom Mitzri, what is this stuff?" Tana of Yosef, Tilsa Sari is made of 1/3 barley flour. Tilsa Kurtame, it's made of 1/3 of saffron. Tilsa Milcha, and 1/3 of salt. Rapapa has a slightly different version of how it's made. Mapik Sari Umayel Chiti. He would take out barley, and instead Rapapa would say it's wheat. Okay, so there's slightly disagreements about how you make this Egyptian stuff. V'simanech sisane. The way to remember which Amora said what. If I had to test you later on, it said, was Rav Papa the one who said it's wheat, or was it Rav Yosef who said it was wheat? Or which one said barley? So how do you say barley? So sisane is actually like a type of dish, like a container. It was a container, a name for a container. Sisane has two sounds, okay? So Rav Yosef said that it's barley, sari, okay, sa'ari, right? And therefore, sisani is the way to remember that it's Rav Yosef, samach, barley, sin, but sin, sasa. That's basically how you remember that it was Rav Yosef who said it was barley. You're never going to forget this now, right? And therefore, as opposed to Rav Papa who said it was wheat. Okay, fine, good. Taralahu. So this is the way you do. This is how you make this zisom dish. You would soak the ingredients together, and then you would toast them, and then you would grind them. And it would only be potent from Pesach until Shavuos. That's the only time it's potent. If a person's constipated, it is a laxative. It loosens a person. And if a person's diarrheic, then it binds the person. If a person's ill or pregnant, it could actually be too intense and actually dangerous to them. So you have to know who could have this dish and who could not. Okay, Vizoman shel tzabaim, and dyer's zoman. Okay, what is this dyer's zoman? Hachi targma in Bavel, they define this as maya de chivri. It's bran water. Okay, it's water in which bran was soaked. Ditzavubu laba, they used to dye red skins. Okay, again, this is a dish where they mix some level of chametz into it. Vamilan shel tabacham, and cooks bread. What is that? Again, there's another type of thing which is chametz. Pas tavua shlo hivia shlish. It's bread made from grain that did not get fully ripe. Shemanichin al pi keder. They'd place it. The cook would place it on the mouth of the pot. Vishoevas hazuma, and absorb the froth. That was the word I was looking for the other day. And basically, what the cook would do if they want to have a dish, and there's a lot of froth out there, right? Certain dishes bring up a lot of stuff, and it's not so it doesn't look so nice. So you put a certain type of bread over it. The bread would absorb the froth. Okay, I don't know how that works, but the point is that you put it on top of at the top of the dish, it would pull out all the froth, and then they pick up the bread, and then sometimes you take a spoon and you try to get all the stuff up from the top. It doesn't always work. So they put this type of bread. It's a special type of bread, but again, it's not your typical bread because it's not fully. It's made from made from stuff that's not fully ripened, and they make some bread from it. They put it on top of the soup or whatever. It would pull out all the broth, and then they take it out. That is something which also is chametz. Okay, the kolon shel sofrim, and then the last thing that was mentioned was the scribes' kolon, the scribe's paste. So now they're going to have a discussion about what exactly it is. Hachatargama parure du shkape. Over here in Bavel, they define this as shoemaker's glue. Okay, this is glue that was used for a shoemaker. That's what it's a reference to. And they had flour mixed into it. Okay, makes sense. Again, flour is a binding agent. Rav Shimi Mechozna Amar zeti pulon shel benos hashir is the hair removal paste of the daughters of the wealthy. Shemesharis osol benos aniyim, which was left over for the daughters of the poor. Okay, so what's going on over here? What's going on over here is as follows. They would have like wax, right? People use wax to remove hair. So this was made with flour and water. Now, normally, the way they make it immediately and then use it, okay? But that's if you're wealthy. If you're wealthy, you went to the salon and they made a few on the spot and then they put it. But it was so beautiful, listen to this, it was so beautiful that it was such a built-in reality back in the day that there was always leftover wax, right? Leftover wax? No leftover wax. Okay, no idea. Okay, fine. We're going to be turning to you for direction over here a little bit. Okay, bottom line is there was leftover wax, and it was like an accepted practice that what they would do is they would give all the leftover wax to the women who couldn't afford it, to the benos aniyim. It was like a built-in thing. Like, they knew that whatever, you take whatever you have, and then whatever's left over, it was like as a given thing, it was left over for the poor people. Now, why is that problematic? Why are we picking on the poor people? We're picking on them because the stuff that's used on the spot, it's not going to get chametz because they mix the flour and the water. Boom, they put it on it's not just flour and water, whatever stuff they had in there, whatever ingredients, and then they put it on, take their hair off. Great. but then that's done quickly. The problem is the leftover stuff, it's sitting around, right? Until it gets to the ani, it's a while, and therefore that stuff is really problematic, right? That's the issue. The issue is that since it remains, it could potentially turn to chametz. Ask the Gemara, Eini, v'tan Rav Chia arba mine medina u'shlosh minei umanos. Rav Chia said about our Mishnah that of the 7 different things listed in our Mishnah, 4 of them are used by the general populace, and 3 of them are things used for those crafts, used for specific crafts. Now, one of the things he put in the category of crafts was this thing, the scribe's colon. He says if it's something which is used for as a hair removal thing, that's not a craft, that's something which is used by the masses. So the Gemara pushes back. The Gemara says, okay, you're right, it's funny, it's called the scribe's colon. If that's the case, you said it's shoemaker's glue. Fine. I don't have a good answer to Rav Chia's question, but at the end of the day, why is it called the scribe's colon? If colon shel ratzanami b'alei, it should be called the shoemaker's colon, right? In other words, your question is Rav Chia's categorization has it within the crafts. It doesn't belong in the crafts. It belongs in the things which are used by the masses, right? We don't see that as a craft, a craftsman's thing. It's something which is used by all the people, all the women. But then the Gemara pushes back. But if you want to tell me that it's the shoemaker's glue, then why is it called scribe's colon? Rav Oshi answers that's not a question. Really, it's shoemaker's glue. My karole colon shel sofrim. Why do they call it scribe's colon? Dis sofrim namim daphu ne'yarosein. Because in addition to the shoemakers, scribes also use it to attach their paper one to another, and therefore it's called scribe's glue. Okay, bottom line is the Gemara seems to leave off that we're not actually talking about the paste that's used for hair removal. Rather, we're talking about the scribe's colon. But tomorrow we're going to get into Eliezer. It talks about Tachshit and Nashim, the women's cosmetics. We'll have to pick up tomorrow.